phone, so I found where his house was, and he lives in a big house, as you probably know, with its own grounds, and he's got a Rottweiler and a Belgian Shepherd, which would eat you alive if you get past the gate. So I'm stood at the top of his drive shouting, Alan Wilson, with these dogs barking at us. And I was there for about half an hour on a Sunday morning, and then one of them came out. So that was my start of the collaboration with Alan and Barham. And then probably a few years after that, they had this really mysterious fire or explosion, which
2011 was it? I think?
2011, summer 2011, which I firmly believe was a murder attempt against Barham.
Can't really, when you see the facts, you can't judge it any other way, really, can you?
Yeah, I went in there not long after the aftermath, and I saw it all, and I could see the state of the two of them, and I thought they need help here. They need to get, they need to explain in concise detail what's happened to them, and the fact that they're not making up the fact that they've been targeted. They were targeted.
And now, I mean, even before that, they'd had, I think, several break-ins and things, hadn't they? In previous residences and things.
It's all in that series. If you want to know what I'm talking about, this well, hours and hours and hours of it, right? It's called The Forensic Historians. Watch it online. And the big question about Wilson and Blackett and their historical research is why? Why have they tried to wipe these two out? And some people would say, well, it's to do with, they don't want the truth about King Arthur, 6th century king. I'm not sure about that. I think it could be more to do with the fact that they've suggested that the people who were known as Celts, I know I've said things about Celts and about how the word Celt wasn't used to describe Celts themselves. They didn't describe themselves as Celts, but these people who predominantly from Wales, Ireland, Western Britain, and Cornwall and Brittany, who were of the same race, which you would call Celt, have origins in places in the Middle East through mass migrations. And I think that really is possibly more sensitive to the ruling elite of the planet than the King Arthur stuff, perhaps.
Because the other thing is that, you know, it's a threat to the British monarchy, isn't it? That the King Arthur line of kings would somehow undermine the perceived right of the British monarchy.
Absolutely. There's people who in Wales who believe they should be the king, the rightful king of Wales. Who are alive now. So certainly they want to maintain Wales as part of the United Kingdom. They don't want any resurgence of any nationalism, but they sort of that in the 1920s when they genocide against all the schools to get rid of Welsh. They put English-speaking teachers into all the schools, but it's that's another story altogether. But Alan Wilson is a very, very intelligent, articulate, knowledgeable man who very dogmatic as well. So what a life he's had. Obviously, your research has proved that there were two King Arthurs and that there were a dynasty of 80 Welsh kings.
Yes.
Now
British kings.
Sorry, British kings.
There weren't any Wales.
Now that also is upsetting possibly to the monarchy. That research.
Yes, it could be.
Just explain why.
Well, Iestyn ap Gwragedd dies. Was deposed in 1091. He allegedly had 14 sons and several daughters. The Welsh gentry, then sons of the lesser ones, all, as in England, kept their pedigrees and their genealogies. And I don't think the British public is generally aware of the huge mass of manuscript evidence that's available in this way. So there are many people around today who can, and some of them do, claim their descent from Iestyn. Actually, the last king was a descendant of his. Morgan was killed in 1300 AD.
Which goes back to Arthur II.
And they all go back to Arthur II, who dies in 579.
Right.
Arthur II is son of King Moerig or Maurice. He is a 6th generation direct descendant of Arthur I, who is Arthur who invaded Europe. His father is a son of Magnus Maximus by Magnus's first wife, Cynric, not his second wife. And he is the only son of Crispus Nobilis Flavius Caesar. Well, Crispus is the eldest son of Constantine the Great. He's the son of Helen, big British princess, and the Emperor Constantine Chlorus, Helen is directly sent it to the Holy Family.
Right.
So it starts to wobble about all over the place.
Yeah.
And a lot of people see him as one of the great Welsh heroes. And I just wanted to cover their story. I think it needed to be
Oh,
to be put
definitely,
out
yeah.
there.
I mean, I found it most compelling and most revealing and interesting. So definitely, yeah. So, and it says about 10 hours or 12 hours of film, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've
done a lot of subjects with it. And I'm currently making a film for Baron Blackett at the moment, all about St. Patrick. Not that I'm particularly interested in Christianity or Catholicism.
But I mean, you developed a relationship with them, and they wanted to make this film because they're now researching St. Patrick, so they came to you, didn't they, and asked you to help out?
Yeah, I'm there to provide the filming for that.
Yeah. Okay, so that was one of the main investigations, and then obviously there was the 7/7. You'd done quite a series of that with Dr. Nick Colostrum and so forth.
Yes, I've not made any film about 7/7. I have interviewed Dr. Nick Colostrum, done 2 lengthy interviews with him, or more than 2, and also I covered the story of Muad'Dib, Anthony John Hill. Now, he made a film about the London bombings, the 7/7 ripple effect, now 7/7 ripple effect 2. If you want to watch it, go online and watch it. Very fact-based documentary about the London bombings, and it provides a credible narrative of what really did happen. And I think, as Nick Colostrum has pointed out, that was why that film was so dangerous, because it wasn't just picking holes in the official story, it was telling you what probably happened and how the 4 young Muslim lads were coached to become patsies. They thought they were taking part in a terrorist training exercise, and they were eventually murdered.
And I think that's just, make a point there that some of these researchers that actually will show you what actually happened, rather than just saying the official story can't be true, they are more targeted, because if they've actually worked out what has happened, that makes them more dangerous. We can say the same for Dr. Judy Wood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You went to see him, and he was in prison at.
What happened was there was obviously the 4 alleged bombers. There was no trial, because they're all dead. Now, in order to bring some gravity to them being guilty, they arrested some of their friends to say, oh, well, you must have helped them. So these friends were on trial, and the judge said to the court, well, obviously, the 4 previous guys, we know that they were all guilty. A completely false statement that he said to the court, right? So Anthony John Hill, he'd made this film about the London bombings, and he thought, well, this judge needs to know the truth. So he sent a copy of his film to the judge, to the court, marked for the judge's attention, and another copy to the jury foreman, right? The jury never saw the film, right? I don't think the jury foreman saw the film. He gets a knock on his door, right? You're being arrested under a European arrest warrant because he lived in Ireland, and he gets extradited, and he spends over 150 days in prison awaiting trial while the phony inquest is going on. So they wanted him behind bars, even though he was found completely innocent of all charges. So because he spent time in prison in Ireland as well for a number of weeks when they first went to his house, and then he was let out, and then there was the extradition hearing. So I went to Ireland, to Dublin, to meet him and interview him. No one had really covered his story, and when I first met him, he didn't want to go on camera. He didn't want his face on camera due to his own personal beliefs, his religious beliefs. Let's call it that, religious beliefs. So I had to kind of, have a conversation with him and say, look, in order to put your story across, if you're in shadow, because that's what he suggested, I said, it's not going to look good. So we discussed it anyway, and put his story across. I went to the inquest, or the hearing, the extradition hearing, and you could hear a pin drop in the court, and all of his supporters were there, so they're trying to get him extradited to Britain to stand trial for supposedly perverting the course of justice, because he sent a DVD to a court in the UK. And the judge asked him to speak, and he had a copy of the Bible in his hand, and he held it up to the court, and he said to the judge, you have a statue of Moses on top of this court. This is his book. In other words, this is the book that Moses was given by God, right? This is the law I follow. Can you tell me, Judge, what law have I broken in this book? That you have and you have a statue of Moses on top of this building that I'm in on trial for extradition. And the judge didn't know what to say. And he got sent down, and I realised then that, you know, that was quite a moment for me, seeing that there was no justice there. And I shouted something out, and then his supporters started shouting stuff out, and he just went down to the cells.
Crazy, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, and I came back to Dublin or Ireland and interviewed him again after he got out of prison in Wandsworth Prison. Oh, I went to see him in Wandsworth Prison as well.
The BBC were asking you to take part in their Conspiracy Files programme.
7/7, yes. Conspiracy Files 7/7.
You gave them conditions for appearing in their documentary about 7/7.
Yes.
Just spell out what those conditions were.
I agreed to take part in their programme with 2 conditions. The first condition was that they would show my film unedited, the film 7/7 Ripple Effect, unedited on primetime television. Okay, and the second condition that I gave them was that I would have final editing rights on their Conspiracy Files 7/7 programme before it went out, because I don't trust the BBC.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Now, once you'd said, these are my conditions, and they obviously weren't happy with that, they wouldn't agree to that.
No, they refused to agree.
They then actually came over to Ireland to try and get you on camera to basically try and debunk you. And we'll just take a look at the clip when they've approached you in Ireland.
Ireland. The search for the man behind 7/7 Ripple Effect has brought us here. From the town of Kells, Muad'Dib has waged a propaganda war to win Britain over to his distorted vision of reality. We can reveal Muad'Dib is John Hill from Sheffield.
John Hill, BBC Conspiracy Files. Can I ask you why you've made a film accusing innocent people of mass murder on 7/7 with no evidence at all? Can I ask you why you're ignoring the huge weight of evidence against the 4 men blamed for the 7/7 bombings? You have made a film which is damaging trust in the British government and is undermining community cohesion in Britain. Is that your intention, Mr. Hill? Mr. Hill, why do you hide behind the name Muad'Dib?
Taking his name from a science fiction film, Muad'Dib, John Hill believes the Ark of the Covenant is buried nearby under the hill of Tara.
Okay, so that's the BBC tactics at work there. And,
despicable.
Despicable. Now,
can I just point out why I didn't answer them on camera when they tried to trap me?
Yeah.
First of all, the questions that they asked were beneath contempt, and absolutely evil, loaded questions, and there is no way that, you know, I treated them with the contempt that they deserved. I ignored them and walked past them. But the other reason also was the fact that I had categorically refused to cooperate with them because they would not meet my conditions. So that is why I walked through them and didn't answer any of the questions, because I'd already told them months in advance that unless they met my conditions, I would not take part in their programme. And then they, against my wishes, they had come to Ireland and they had stalked everything.
Well, actually, I've come to Ireland to stalk Muad'Dib, so here's my version of the hit piece. The search for the man behind 7/7 Ripple Effect has brought us here, to the town of Kells. So we're going to do exactly what the BBC did. We're going to wait outside his house until he comes out the door, and then we're going to pounce on him. John Hill, Richplanet Conspiracy Files. Can I ask why you have made a film accusing guilty people of mass murder on 7/7 with lots of evidence? Can I ask why you have highlighted the huge weight of evidence that proves the 4 men blamed for the 7/7 bombings were innocent? You have made a film which is damaging what little trust is left in the British government and is promoting community cohesion in Britain. Is that your intention, Mr. Hill?
Yes.
If you want to see his film 7/7 Ripple Effect 2, when he has made a number of other films.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so that again was quite a sort of big part of some of the Richplanet series, wasn't it? And I think also you used that in this Tell Your MP About 7/7 campaign, didn't you? You encouraged people to send copies to their MP and stuff. And,
that was.
And I think that had a bit of an impact, didn't it? Because there were a couple of MPs that did strange things, and weren't there?
Yeah. So this was 2012. I was encouraging people, because when you go to your MP, if it's an issue that's not in their constituency, or if you don't live in that constituency, they show you the door. So my idea was to get people in constituencies all around the UK going to their MP to enlighten them about the London bombings, because the evidence is fairly clear if you actually take time to look at it. It's not been reported in the media, but I wanted people to give that to their MPs, and I managed to get over 100 people doing that. And I did get feedback from one Scottish MP who said that he was most interested in the information, and then he would do something to help. I'm not aware that he did anything, but so it was being discussed, and I do think that because I've got about half a dozen letters which came from the character James Brokenshire, who's the UK security minister, and I think he's a key figure in all this, because a lot of the letters that the MPs wrote to ask the government about the London bombings, he was the one who was replying to them all, and he's still in office now. So he's a name to watch. He must know, that guy.
Yeah.
He's not an old guy. He's probably, I don't know, he's probably youngish. He's probably about 50 something like that. But I think he's their safe pair of hands to just rebut. Here's the inquest papers. Go and look at that. Here's the inquest papers. Go and look.
I mean, I remember writing to one MP or something back in 2005 about 9/11, and I got this letter back from the Counter-Terrorism Policy Office, and I said to them, the official story of 9/11 doesn't stack up, and they wrote back and said, we are aware of other theories, but we just stand by what's in the 9/11 Commission report, so that's all we're going to say. So they weren't disagreeing with me or criticising the alternative explanations. They were just saying they follow the narrative that's been given to them, and it's the same. That's how it works. Once they have got a narrative which is rubber stamped by the government, they'll just follow that, even if some of them, know that it's wrong.
Didn't you write to the police as well, and they came to your house?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, they did. I wrote to the police and all chief police officers, chief constables. I wrote to them in end of 2008, basically giving them a summary of the Dr. Judy Wood material and what we'd been doing with that. And then, in February 2009, I got a visit from two people that claimed to be from the police, and had a chat with them for about 10 minutes, and sent them off with a couple of DVDs. They were quite polite. They weren't hostile or anything, and I wasn't either. There are people there that they know that the official narratives aren't true, but they're tasked with keeping them in place, and keeping them in the forefront of people's minds. And then just to go on to that a little bit, because you've provided us with great support for the Dr. Judy Wood, Where Did the Towers Go book, and certainly through Richplanet, I think it's probably in the UK where we've had the most book sales and so forth, and you've taken them on the tours, and so that has been, I think, certainly as far as I can tell, a hugely important factor in raising the awareness of the truth about 9/11 in the UK. You've played a key role in that. And then again, on top of that, you did the 3D analysis, which you revised last year, based on some sort of revised evidence or analysis of the evidence. So that also is very important. And I think I'll just mention here very briefly that we did the program with Mark Conlon about the video fakery being promoted, and that, since we did that program a few weeks ago now, Mark Conlon has had his YouTube channel deleted, he has his Google account deleted, and he's had to re-upload some of his own videos because we feel, while that's happened, he feels, and I agree with him, that they wanted to keep this video fakery going in terms of fake planes being done with CGI, whereas we were tending towards the conclusion, much based on your research, that it was some type of image projection that we used. In other words, real video of a fake plane, as you said, rather than fake video of a normal plane. So that again is, I think, is a key area of research that's rattled a few cages in the powers that be. So again, I think Richplanet has found itself right in the midst of all of that, and there's still a couple of things we haven't got to yet. So there was another kind of what we thought was some type of false flag, which, there was a few, I didn't study it as much as Nick Colostrom did, but the next thing that really kind of sort of was a turning point in the history of Richplanet was the Lee Rigby incident, wasn't there? And so talk about that.
Yes, well, after making programmes with Edge Media Television, and I do think there's a story, an untold story about Edge Media Television and who was really behind it. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it as a cryptic comment. I'm not saying everyone involved, but that channel folded. So I sought out another channel, and I just went through the channels on Sky, and there was one that I recognised, which was what used to be called the Paranormal Channel, and it was bought by a company called Information TV. So I wrote to them, or I rang them up, and I said, I've got these programs, because I had programs that hadn't aired on Edge Media because they folded that quickly, and they took them up, and they were showing them free of charge at first, but as their channel became filled with more and more programs, the price went up. So they were charging me £600 a show to air a single 1 hour show when I finished. But we had this incident where I interviewed Dr. Nick Colostrom about the Lee Rigby event. One complaint came in because this person said what he said was offensive, that he was saying that he didn't believe the official story, there was no blood, and the usual things that Nick Colostrom will say. And I was taken off air, and I was effectively my show was pulled. So this was the soldier who got knocked over by a car allegedly, and then allegedly had his head cut off. Nick Colostrom is saying that no, it didn't happen that way. This was set up as a false flag event. He's entitled to that opinion, but Showcase TV and Ofcom didn't see it that way. So an investigation was launched, and there was two findings against the programme. One, that it wasn't suitable for young people, and it was a photograph that I just cut and pasted from the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
So why aren't they taking the 6 o'clock news off? Oh, that's because of the things you were saying when that picture was on the screen. And the other finding, I think, don't quote me because it's a while ago, it was offensive or something, right? So, right, you can't offend anyone anymore, right?
And they were petrified about losing their license when they were being fined £30,000 or whatever it was.
Let me give you the background to that. So there was another very good program on Showcase at that time, series of programs, Paradigm Shift TV, and they put out a lot of good shows, and which complemented mine in many ways. But they had aired a program called Cancer: The Forbidden Cures. Go online and watch it. It's a brilliant film. They aired that program, and they then got a complaint from Ofcom. So it's my suspicion that the pharmaceutical industry lent on Ofcom somehow in order to get that inquiry launched, and they were threatened. The channel was threatened with a £30,000 fine for daring to air a program about alternative cancer cures, right? So after that point in time, I don't think the fine was ever imposed, but the channel was extremely wary after that point. So when, after the Lee Rigby thing, the channel were checking every program, because I don't think they actually checked the Lee Rigby program, right? They weren't checking all of the content from start to finish, they were just relying on me to check it. So every program I was submitting, they were picking up on things. You can't suggest that there's fabricated terror. Those animal mutilation photographs are too graphic. You can't say that there's a cover-up on the Madeleine McCann case. So 99% of my content wasn't going to be, I had to change it. So,
and I think there were several times where you'd edited these shows, sometimes at quite long, it takes quite a long period of time, and then you'd have to edit them to suit the channel, which would have taken you too long to meet the deadline anyway, wouldn't it? And
and then it doesn't represent my point, my evidence. So Ofcom lent on that channel, and the channel cut my show. Okay, they did allow me back on, but the fact that they lent on them meant that they were then censoring the content. So Ofcom didn't have to flex their muscles too much to get all of the dangerous content out of Richplanet. And that's how it works. Now, I will defend the channel in this, because they're not set up to be some to be a channel making some political statement. They are a money-making business just like any other business. All they want is programmes submitted to them so they can put them out and they can get their £600 an hour. They've got hundreds of thousands of pounds to pay in paying for the airtime, right? So they have to recover that from the programme makers. So if they're going to get threats from Ofcom and whatnot from programme makers, they're just going to ditch that programme. All right. Now, people would say, no, it is their fault. They should be allowing you to air that. I can understand that point of view, but ultimately it's Ofcom who lent on the programme to scare them off, which caused me now not being on TV. I'm sure they would have my programmes back tomorrow if the content was dumbed down. But what's the point of that?
Yeah, there's no point. I mean, it's not what you're about.
And on the internet, I would say the programmes have got as many viewers now as they did have on TV.
Yeah, and so that brings us really, I think that was 2015 when you moved to YouTube, essentially, was it? I think it was around about then,
yeah, so,
2014, 2015.
Yeah.
So one of the next big investigations that was going on around the time that there was this sort of things happening with Ofcom and the TV channel and so forth, you know, I think you realised, for example, that you weren't going to get a documentary about Madeleine McCann that you were making around that same sort of time. That was never going to get out on Showcase or Information TV. You're going to have to do it another way. So talk about Madeleine McCann and how you got into doing that and why.
So I was still involved with the channel after I'd made the first Madeleine documentary, and I put it to them, and just no way. I even mentioned it in a trailer, saying I have made a film about Madeleine McCann. You can find it here. They wouldn't even have that. So and the director said, well, they're far too litigious for us to dare to put a programme out about Madeleine McCann. If we just talk about cover-ups now in general, I think it's useful to point out that I've learned a lot through these last 10 years about how the police, intelligence services and the media all work. And I think you can draw a clear distinction between what you might call false flag events and cover-ups. Because all false flag events are cover-ups. They're covered up because they're selling a bogus story. But all cover-ups are not false flag events. Some cover-ups are brought about because there's been an error. So I would put Madeleine McCann case in that category. So if something happened that they didn't expect, that if all of the truth had come out, heads would have had to roll. There would have been big ramifications, in my opinion, there. So that's covered up. I don't think it was orchestrated from the start.
And I'll interject here as well, in that I've had people write to me saying that Madeleine McCann never existed. It was the whole thing was a false flag. You know, so if you look at the evidence, that supposition is pretty crazy, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and obviously they will do that in order to muddy the waters.
Yes.
To try and muddle up whether it's a cover-up or a false flag.
Yes.
You think everything's a false flag? Well, no, not necessarily. Another good example would be the Didcot murders. That was not a false flag. It wasn't planned in advance. That was a cover-up. Yeah.
And that was something to do with the way that the police were operating, you think, wasn't it, or something?
In my opinion, they ran the investigation with a bogus story at the inquest in order to cover up police incompetence or something that the police had done. So the police were indirectly linked to what happened in those Didcot murders. And you see how what they do, how they justify this internally in the police force, is they will say, well, the Chief Constable has referred this case to, let's say, MI5, and MI5 now deem this a matter of national security, so we are now going to spin this bogus story, and then once they're involved, they've then got their arm into the media, and they can spin their bogus story in the media, and that's how it works. Yeah. So I think some cover-ups possibly don't get past Chief Constable level into intelligence. I think you've got cases where there's corrupt police officers operating, let's say perhaps with drugs, people who profit from drugs, who are involved with police, and the police are getting paid off by drugs people. That might not get to a Chief Constable level and the cover-up approved by, let's say, MI5, but there are cases where it does, just depending on who's involved and what exactly the cock-up has been. If they can twist it so that the cock-up needs to be covered up for reasons of national security. So, for example, in the Didcot murders case, I believe that if the truth comes out about that case, the police would have to completely change some of their working practices throughout the whole country in terms of how they manage data, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want to do that, so they cover it up with a false narrative because it's going to cost too much or what have you. It's in the national interest not to lose faith in the police. That's how they would say it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you could sort of argue that was for them, for the powers that be, an issue of national security, and if the reputation at a high level of the police is compromised, then that's making the country less secure. You know,
and I'm suspect the same as when they've run the Madeline cover-up. The same excuse will be being applied internally, that this is a matter of national security. So, and perhaps in other cases they use D notices as well. So I believe I've become quite good at spotting a case that's got element of cover-up in it from the high level, due to how they manage the story in the media. You can spot them. You get a nose for it.
And I mean, you know, I'd just like to talk a little bit more about the McCann documentaries, because I think that's now become recognised. Your documentaries have become recognised as the authoritative source of coverage of the McCann case. And I think what was 17 hours now altogether that you've done on that?
With including the Peter Hyatt interview.
Yes. And so I mean, that's that again, if people watch those documentaries, they will learn through just the way it's presented and the facts that are presented, just what you've been talking about, how you know, the cover-ups are put in place and how they're managed and how the media is managed by certain groups and interests and so forth. And that's highly instructive. And I think perhaps I'm right in saying that with the Madeleine McCann case for you, that was kind of a bit of a shift away from the UFO type stuff and some of the still very important topics. But I think you particularly mentioned this, I think, in one of your talks in your tour, that you'd moved more towards, I think you called it real crime investigations.
True crime.
True crime investigations.
Yeah. So, as I said, you get a nose for a cover-up, and a nose for whether that cover-up has been authorised, an authorised cover-up, right? Which usually has this national security issue attached to it. So an example of that would be Operation ORE, where there's 2 cabinet ministers alleged to have purchased pornography, and that was covered up because it was considered a matter of national security, because we are going to war. I can't remember if it was Afghanistan or Iraq, and it would have affected the morale of the troops. That, I believe, was the excuse as to how they were able to cover that up. The Jill Dando case is another example of an establishment-approved cover-up, right? I can list several others. So these cases are very interesting to me. I'm not really interested as much in, let's say, low-level police corruption, although it is a very important thing that needs to be stamped out. It's when the lies become authorised from the highest level that I like to get involved in and cover them up. Another one which is related to UFOs, which was an authorised cover-up, was the Berwyn Mountain UFO case, where something crash-landed in 1974. There was no earthquake, folks. And this was the thing that everyone was missing when I started to investigate that case. Because I will often take the investigations of others and then make a film and try and progress that investigation further. So Margaret Fry and Scott Felton had been investigating the Berwyn case for years, fantastic research, and I came along with a fresh pair of eyes. And one of the main things that I established was that, look, they've used Edinburgh University and the British Geological Survey to fabricate the fact that there was an earthquake. There was no earthquake. Something crash-landed, as all of the evidence shows, and they've covered it up with the earthquake. So I got a professional geologist to look at the report who more or less concluded that there's nothing in this report that shows an earthquake. So I do like to work with other researchers on films, but try and just use common sense and logic and problem solving to progress those cases further.
Absolutely, and I think that's, you know, what we've said in previous talks that we've done, is that engineering is about problem solving. And so, you know, I think our mindset when we approach these things is perhaps orientated towards that, sometimes deliberately and sometimes because that's the way we've been trained or that's the experience we've had. And like you say, you can then, I felt very much that way about ufology, how my understanding of that has unfolded. Like, you know, I used to think Stephen Greer was great and he was could do no wrong, but then I realised he was actually at some point he become part of the cover-up. You know, and you see it because of certain patterns that emerge, and in the way that information is covered up, or information that's not talked about, which is blatantly obvious that it's important.
It is interesting now to look back at the 2001 Disclosure Project with what we know now about Greer, and just ask the questions about, well, what was really going on there. I do think many of those witnesses were genuine witnesses. They were letting some steam out of the pressure cooker, if you will,
That's what I
to get some information out there to perhaps test the water, but they were using perhaps a pair of hands that they had some control over. That would be my guess with Greer.
Well, I mean, you know, as I talked about recently at the UFO Truth Conference, Greer actually admitted that in an interview in April, I think, 2017, that he made a deal with the CIA. He actually says that in the interview. So that right there, you know, is pretty much just what you said. So
and there's the fact that he got this cancer and then cured himself of it. Was that some way of controlling him?
Right. So Richard, we've talked before about, you know, we go through all of this, we look at all these different cases, we realise that there's other stuff there that we need to look at and uncover to find the truth, basically. So the problem then comes is how we convey our knowledge to other people. And, you know, you get asked a lot, but how do you live with this? How do you talk to people? How do you get them interested? You know, you were saying just a few minutes ago about how you were speaking to somebody in the pub the other night about this Las Vegas shooting and stuff.
Yeah, so when somebody asks me what I do for a living, usually I won't discuss what I really do for a living. I will just say I do video editing on the internet, and I might talk about that. So because that person has not necessarily asked to be shown the rabbit hole, it's not really fair to give people that information if they've not asked for it specifically, because people are happy with the knowledge that they have. I've got a channel, I give lectures, I put out information that way, because one person is one person out of 60 million in the UK and 6 or 7 billion in the world. What difference is it going to make persuading one person on a one-to-one basis that might end up in an argument? Now, and it has ended up in an argument in the pub, but the problem with that is the person you're arguing with has seen the front page of the Daily Mail. I've done a lot of research into the nitty-gritty detail of the cases that I've looked at.
Yes.
Right? So they don't really have a chance in a discussion, and they will walk away with their tail between their legs. And that has happened. But it's not really fair to do that to people. So that's why I try to keep it light-hearted. I try not to, if I'm in a social situation, to get on my soapbox, unless the person is wanting the information.
That's it. I mean, we were talking about this. It's curiosity, isn't it? If somebody's curious about something, whether they've had, you know, something that's happened in their life which is unusual, like they've been treated in an unusual way in a health scenario by their doctor or the hospital, or they've had something unusual happen in a court case where they feel the law has been influenced, or, you know, they have a UFO sighting, or some type of psychic experience or something like that.
A near-death experience.
A near-death experience. So that often can arouse curiosity and therefore make them more able to take on board a different way of looking at a scenario. And this is also what I found, that a lot of people, they're not really ready to open up into this new area of knowledge that you and I, you know, talk about. And then sort of a follow-on from that, Richard, is that once people have become curious and they've seen your program, or, you know, they've listened to maybe an interview I've done on YouTube somewhere or something, and you know, they know that I've written a book, Dr. Judy Wood's written a book, and then they'll come to us and say, oh, you should investigate this. This is really unusual. This is linked to that. I'm sure of it. You know, why don't you do a program about this? Why don't you cover this? Come on, you know, you need to do this.
Yeah.
And we, you know, it's always quite awkward, isn't it, when we get into that situation?
Yeah, I can identify with that. I get a bag full of emails every day telling me what I should be doing.
Yeah.
Here's a link to this. You look at that. right? I'm now going to go back to my life and do my things. That's the kind of thing you should do, Richard D. Hall. Do it, right? Instead of them taking some personal responsibility for that information. And let's just explain it in a slightly more philosophical way. We all have a consciousness. We're all conscious of the world. That consciousness is separate from you, from your physical body. Your consciousness uses the physical body to experience that world. The outside world, the physical body, your consciousness. So you can make a decision in that consciousness. I want to do something about this. I'm not happy about that information. I'm being lied to. Someone's deceiving me. So your conscious mind, it's figuring it out, your intelligence wants to do something. But what happens with a lot of people is they will then invent an excuse which comes from the physical world, which might be to do with something in their job. Oh, well, I haven't got enough hours in the day to take responsibility for that. I've got to take my kids to school. I haven't got enough money. Or I've got some physical problem. I've got a bad leg. Or I'm too old. Or I'm too young. Or I'm not experienced enough.
Nobody will listen to me.
No one will listen to me. So these are all physical world things. So what they're doing is they're identifying something in the physical world to stop them, to stop that consciousness from taking action, from preventing their will from making things happen in the physical world. They're finding an excuse in the physical world to stop their will from transpiring into the physical world, right? You should investigate this, Richard. You do that.
That's right.
Okay, I'll do everything, folks.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
So I've got responsibilities. I've got a limit on finance. I've got a limit on time. I haven't have an infinite amount of time in the world. I've got to find time. And part of the challenge is using your conscious mind, which includes your intelligence, to understand that physical world, including your own physicality, the outside world. It's like a game of chess with your conscious mind against that physical world. And if you let that physical world beat you, you will never get anything done.
No.
Right? You have to understand that physical world and understand how it reacts with your consciousness and not let the physical world beat those decisions or your conscious mind. Right?
And I agree with all of that. And I think, the problem is that people they see that the mainstream is corrupted and has its own agenda, and then they'll come across people like you who've got an alternative set of programs which are sort of mirror in some ways some of the ways that programs are put together in mainstream. So they then come to you because you are giving them something they can't get from elsewhere, and then they have this expectation of you. And even though what you're doing is entirely voluntary, because you don't actually say, you must give me this money to produce Richplanet. You say, I do Richplanet, I need to have food and I need to have a vehicle to drive around the country to go and do the investigations. And you have ways that people can fund you from the tours and the small amount from the merchandise and stuff. But beyond that, you're not elected. You aren't part of the police. You haven't haven't made an agreement with anybody to be employed doing this.
Yeah.
And
people
so,
talk to you like you're some official representative of something.
Yes.
And that you have the responsibility you're answerable to them.
To them, yes, indeed. And I had this very recently we've had this awful situation in California with these fires. And somebody was essentially saying to me on Facebook, oh, you should investigate in this. Why aren't you investigating this? It's because it's got parallels with 9/11. You should be interested in this. And I'm saying, well, look, I actually said to them, I actually find it quite upsetting to look at these homes being destroyed. I don't want to investigate it, thank you very much. Not thoroughly, I'll look at it and be curious, but at this point, I don't want to. And I've said to them, I'm a volunteer in this, And so what I say to people, going back to a point, is if you want to do an investigation about something, do it, as you were saying, with your own consciousness. And if you've got the equipment to send an email to Richard or to me, it also means you've got the equipment to make a blog. You've got the equipment to make a YouTube video.
Submit an FOI request.
Submit an FOI
request.
request.
To whoever you want to. any number of investigative things that you can do, and then at least go part of the way to an investigation and put it into a nice, compact, digestible form, then send it to me. Then it just makes my job, your job, a lot easier.
And if we see that, and we see that somebody's put a lot of work into something, we're far more likely to sort of take them seriously. That we would probably follow up on their words. And,
but that's not to say that I don't thoroughly welcome people giving me information. Look at this. Did you know this? Right. That is important, because without the information I get from viewers, a lot of the investigations wouldn't happen, because I wouldn't have as much intelligence.
That's it. I mean, the input does shape what you do, doesn't it? But it doesn't top to bottom dictate what you do, does it? I mean, you get leads like we had the Julian Assange thing, didn't we, where that chap wrote to you and said that, oh, he was in my studio, things like that, and that was quite a big part of that investigation, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the icing on the cake for the Julian Assange programme. The fact that he'd actually been into this studio, and he was obviously being managed and what have you. So that was the Richplanet viewer, Rob he's called.
But he didn't ask you to go to his house and interview him, or go and see his friend and knock on his door. He just gave you that information, didn't he?
I asked him, he told me what had happened at a talk. He came up to me after a talk, and I asked him to put it in and write it up in detail, the sequence of events in a Word document, and I got a Word document from him. And I just thought, fantastic, I can use this.
So that's what we hope people will do, is give us as much information as they can in a sort of suitable form. And then if it fits in with what you are doing already, or you want to make it the subject of a future investigation, that's your decision, isn't it? Basically, how you use that. And I'd say the same for myself, although I don't work in the same way that you do, obviously. So Richard, I think we've covered quite well, the sort of history of Richplanet, and as I say, we're coming up to the 10th anniversary. So with that sort of in mind, what about the future? What are you going to be doing? Because people are always asking me, is Richard working on this, free energy and all of this, So what's coming up for next year and things, 2018?
Well, I imagine I will be doing a tour next year. It's probably going to be later in the year than normal, maybe in May, something like that. But I want to get all of the content sorted for the tour, which I'm currently involved in 2 or 3 investigations now, and I want to get to a certain point in those investigations before I launch a tour. I want to have all new material for the tour next year. So I will be bringing out at least 1 new film for that tour. It's a cover-up, a case that everyone will know about. I don't really want to mention it yet. There's other things that I'm wanting to look into. There's the cat mutilation cases. I'm very interested in that. I think that needs a full investigation, independent investigation, not a police investigation. And with regards to the Myers stuff that you mentioned there, the free energy, I've not had a chance to get that back out. I did make a fair bit of progress with it. I've generated a lot of hydrogen from that system. If I get time, I will. I need to look at that perhaps over the Christmas period. So a number of things. I'll not be putting out much content in the beginning part of 2018, because I will be involved in detailed investigations, hopefully to bring out some new information.
And as you said before,
it's not really possible to do a show on a regular basis, fortnightly, as I have been doing, or even weekly, to do that and then come up with something which is an all-encompassing investigation. You need to have some time off to do that. So that I don't really want to give too much away on it.
No. I mean, as you said before, I think if you've got anything you feel is important enough to say, you'll post it, won't you? When you're ready. If you want to do a YouTube video in January or February or something, then you will. But other than that, you have no specific plans to do that before the tour.
And I just want to say that throughout these last 10 years, I have drawn on the knowledge of a lot of other people, standing on the shoulders of giants, if you like. So there's yourself, Judy Wood, Nick Colostrom, Alan Wilson, Anthony John Hill, Scott Felton,
yes,
David Caton, Phil Hoyle, Mike Freebury, Neil Sanders, Tony Bennett, and probably a load that I've forgotten about, and I'm sorry if I've forgotten to mention. But yeah, I don't work as a team with any of those people, but collaborate with them and draw on their knowledge and try and portray it as best I can. So
Yes.
I'd like to thank all those researchers, yourself included.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely, and it's you know, we collaborate. Basically, we collaborate when we feel like it and when we feel we need to do it, but we don't have a definite plan to do things at on a given schedule, really, do we? So I think it works much better like that. It's more organic, and you know, it just works a lot better. I don't have a commitment to you. You don't have a commitment to me, particularly, other than as friends. So that's the way it works.
And the other advantage of working